Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. This is your regular update for all your tillage news and advice. Over the last few months, the level of commentary and concern has increased around the environment and the impact we're having on the world around us. The concern about greenhouse gases and climate change are at the top of every government's to-do list, but also for the corporate world. There's also concern about our water and how this will be protected in the short and medium term. Tillage farmers are part of the problem, but equally may be part of the solution. The recent Crops Forum delves into both the greenhouse gases or carbon area and also the impact of tillage farming on water quality. Dr. Gary Lanigan from Teagasc spoke about the carbon cycle and how farmers can maximise carbon capture on their farms. Eddie Burgess from the Agricultural Catchments Programme in Teagasc describes the issue with nitrate leaching from tillage land and how this can be mitigated. The full webinar can be found on the Teagasc Crops YouTube page. We've pulled together the questions and answers section from the webinar to give you a flavour of the information discussed. So after Gary finished his presentation, I first asked him who will pay the farmer for sequestering carbon.
This is the $64,000 question. Certainly within industry, within the foods and drinks industry, it's very, very high on their agenda. The whole area of sustainability and sustainability from from an environmental, but also from a social responsibility point of view, is becoming it's going much more up the agenda of the big companies. If you look at the moment, nearly all of the large food and drinks companies, and in fact, all the large multinationals are employing, directors of sustainability. They're investing huge amounts of money in sustainability research. We see it across our food companies, for example, and the foods and drinks industry. Getting a carbon neutral pint or a carbon neutral loaf of bread is very, very high up the agenda. And really being able to prove that on farms is in fact, I suppose, one of the central tenets and, one of the central, driving factors of the signpost farms. So how can we work towards climate neutral agriculture? Now, for the tillage sector, that's probably not going to be too difficult. But for animal agriculture, it is going to be very, very challenging.
Okay, so if we go back then to the a tillage farm being able to trap more carbon than they're emitting. So if you like, we have, say, a tillage farmer has, in your example there, a number of tons. Are those going to be a valuable commodity to be traded, if you like? Can they be traded at the moment? And is there a prospect of that happening in the future?
Okay, so at the moment they can't be traded, but there is nothing to stop either the government introducing a national domestic offsetting scheme. They're doing it in France. They're doing it in New Zealand. So there is the opportunity there. But there is also the opportunity for private companies, for example, to trade in carbon credits. So you see, for example, in the US, there's actually quite a vibrant carbon market out there. And there's loads of companies going around verifying the carbon credentials of farms. They're on to me now nearly monthly, particularly because we're setting up the series of flux towers across, our signpost farms and monitoring sites to verify how much carbon is actually being stored in our soils. So it is going to gain traction, and how valuable it will depend on the price of carbon. So the price of carbon on the emission traded sector markets at the moment is roughly about €50 a ton. So, if you're sequestering, 2-3 tons a hectare, that's €150 a hectare. So it depends on how the market will evolve, but certainly a market will evolve, because there's only one way the price of carbon is going to go, and that's up.
So Gary, just on that, is it so you come up with kind of a net at the very end for that farm? Is it the net bit that's traded, or is it the bit that you sequester along the way that's traded on a per hectare basis?
Okay, so it depends on what you're measuring and what your boundary is, but ultimately it should be the amount of, so for example, it should be the amount of carbon in if you put in a project, and the project is to grow 2 hectares of forestry on your land, it can be bounded by that single project. So it could simply be that 2 or 3 hectares of forestry, depends what you elect into it. You could elect the whole farm into it and make the whole farm carbon neutral. It ultimately depends on who's purchasing the credits. If it's for a single project, it can be simply a single field. If it is the government doing it, it would probably be across the entire farm and the entire enterprise.
We have a question here about the carbon loss through ploughing, which I think you said was 1.5 to 2 tons. I think that was in a diagram, and it's just one of the participants here is just didn't quite understand it. You might maybe just go across that again.
Okay, yeah. So there's kind of 2 or 3 ways that ploughing induces loss of carbon. And the first way is it breaks up the soil aggregates. So it exposes some of the carbon that's physically protected to decomposition. And the second thing it does is it aerates the soil, so it allows more oxygen down into the profile, and the microbes that eat soil carbon, they need oxygen the same way we do. So as you aerate the soil more, you get more accelerated decomposition. And the other thing that you do is you actually expose carbon that's been protected for quite a long time. So mainly carbon that's been sloshing around in the system for hundreds of years. You expose that to decomposition and replace it with carbon that comes and goes quite quickly. So there's actually 3 mechanisms by which soil carbon is lost via inversion ploughing.
Okay.
And in fact, Michael, one of the things we're looking at is actually going to very deep ploughing, and actually trying to actually bury the carbon-rich topsoil further down.
Which is an impact in a grassland type situation.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask you this one, and I think the answer mightn't be overly simple necessarily, because we're getting into all sorts of complexities. But anyways, do the forestry values that you put out there assume that the output, i.e. the timber, is fixed and secure as a sea storage method? So if our output, so I'll just finish the question, Gary, and come in. And so if the timber output was just displacing timber from other sources and was not counted as a permanent store, how would forestry sea balance be affected? I know we're kind of getting into the forestry one, so you might keep this one brief.
No, but that's okay. So the figures I quoted were for a 20-year-old forestry stand, and that would be the amount of carbon being sequestered per year by that stand. So what happens when forestry reaches, gets to clear felling? So the carbon is assumed to accumulate during the period during which the forest is growing. You get canopy closure, and then you either thin or you clear fell. So if you clear fell, the carbon isn't all assumed to go back up into the air. It enters a pool called harvested wood products. And those products, depending on what they are, be they furniture or be they put into houses, have different periods. They have different lifetimes. So when you cut down the wood in your forest, it's not all assumed to just kind of disappear up as CO2 automatically.
Okay. Gary, I'm going to ask you this one. It was asked in what are the main challenges of carbon in a mixed farming system, but I suppose maybe the real question here is that would a mixed farming system with animals and tillage involved in that, and perhaps forestry, you already said there, allow a more carbon neutral farming system?
Yeah, and the answer is probably yes, because if you have a mixed farming system, then you can rotate your grassland around the farm. So you can help ameliorate your soil organic carbon that way. If you can again bring some woodland features into it, we're starting some experimentation on agroforestry, for example, or again manage your hedgerows better, which will not only improve your carbon content of your hedgerows and your soil underneath, but the biodiversity of the hedgerows. If you can bring all these mixes together, if you can manage your manure well, and utilize your slurry instead of concentrating on mineral fertilizer, you can bring legumes into the system again to displace mineral fertilizer. Then absolutely within a mixed livestock and tillage farming system, yeah, you can achieve carbon neutrality, yeah, or get very, very close.
Gary, just one last question before we go across to Eddie Burgess. And the question is really about the amount of carbon taken up by different crops. Is there a direct association with the level of dry matter taken up by each crop? So the higher it yields, the more carbon it gets, or is it more complex than that?
No, it's more complex than that. And it's mainly more due to how long the green area index of the field is. So if a winter crop, for example, will capture more carbon than say a spring crop. So a perfect example would be maize, which of course has a very high dry matter yield, but actually loses more carbon out of that. You lose more carbon out of that system than you would say out of a winter oilseed rape or a winter wheat system.
Following on from this questions and answers session with Gary, Eddie Burgess delivered his presentation on nitrate leaching, which highlighted tillage farmers are part of the nitrate leaching problem, especially in the southeast of the country. Eddie was joined on the panel by Shay Phelan, a tillage specialist in Teagasc. I first asked Eddie about the contribution of the livestock sector and why these farmers aren't more in the firing line for nitrate leaching into rivers.
Yeah, I'd say they are, Michael, to be honest. We're working a lot with the nitrates review document at the moment, and I've came back from Moore Park, had an open day, have today, and the previous 2 days I've had an open day, and all the discussion is on sustainability and the review of the nitrates action program. And the couple of changes that I've mentioned there are significant for the tillage sector, but there are a lot more changes coming down the line for the livestock sector in general, but more specifically for the intensive dairy farming under derogation. And the derogation is the term derogation. I think people don't realize derogation is a derogation to the rules. It has to be applied for and it has to be approved. It's not a given, and the derogation may not be approved.
So just one of the main measures you identified there is cover crops. I just wanted to come to Shay here for a second. Shay, when cover crops go in, how much of the nitrates or how far does that go in terms of lapping it up? And I suppose the other small question with it then, if a farmer grazes that cover crop before the end of the year, does that impact on the nitrate leaching, if you like?
Yeah, it's a good question, Michael. It's kind of like a piece of string. How long is a piece of string? So if you take it, yesterday was a closing date for last catch crop sowing. So if you're putting in at last catch crop yesterday, chances are it's not going to take up too much. It's not going to mop up too much nitrogen from now to the end of the season. Plus, you also have to factor in that since the crop was removed, like Eddie showed earlier on, that there is nitrate being leached when the crop has been removed, so it's not going to take back up that nitrate. So ideally, with catch crops, the earlier you can get them in, the better. And ideally, in a situation where, say, something like winter barley, if you're going after winter barley, you can. And I've seen crops at the moment where there's fodder rape and fodder kaolin, and if we can use the measure like that have a GAI of over 1 at the moment. So if you take at that, in that scenario, they have nitrate levels in that crop of about 50 kilos a hectare. So in that scenario there, they've already taken that nitrate risk out of the equation already, because the nitrate is actually stored in the crop. So in that scenario, yeah, there's huge capacity there, but it depends on the catch crop and when you sow them and the type of catch crop you sow as well. From the point of view then of grazing them, like those crops that are sown, those fodder rape, fodder kales, they are sown. If they are grazed off pre-Christmas or shortly after Christmas, obviously that nitrate is, the crop is transformed into nitrate, and the urine and dung that's left behind by the animals. And that is a potential that there is potential that can be lost to the system again, I suppose. But obviously the closer you graze them to a crop being sown in the spring, the better from that point of view, from the risk of nitrate or nitrate leaching. So ideally, if you can leave to grazing until after Christmas, it's probably better from that point of view.
Okay, Eddie, can I come back to you? Cover crops, I suppose, are the main one that you identified. Is there any other measures that a tillage farmer can put in place to help reduce nitrate losses?
There is, and they're doing them all, Michael. Good nutrient management, having the pH right. The main one, avoiding excessive nitrogen. It's the surplus nitrogen that causes the problem. I'm not saying not to put out what's recommended, but if your pH is incorrect or if your K levels are low, trying to compensate by going out with an extra 20 units of nitrogen is not the way to fix it. You need to get the overall soil fertility correct in the first place. And my experience is a lot of tillage farmers are doing that.
Okay.
Straw incorporation measure that's in now and planting straw in, that may soak up a lot of nitrogen that's in the soil. I talked about the carbon nitrogen ratio and the breakdown of the organic matter in straw that gets incorporated. The microbes in that will take nitrogen out of the soil for them to grow, to break down the straw there. So that could be a benefit from a nitrate leaching point of view as well.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one final question because we're just a little bit over time, and I apologize for that. We're maybe another 5 minutes or so. As regards nitrates, is it possible to get to, if you like, zero or close to zero in terms of nitrates in the river? And I suppose in the same regard, do we have a handle on what the background nitrate leaching is, even if we didn't do intensive agriculture?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Michael.
Sorry, no, it's too hard.
I'd say no is the answer. We don't know what the background level is. The EPA have highlighted a trend of increasing nitrate levels. In my opinion, a lot of that is driven by the changing in weather pattern, the drier summers followed by wetter winters that flush out nitrogen that's mineralized there. Crops receiving no nitrogen, like beans, are probably ironically a higher risk for nitrate loss than crops that have a lower nitrate use efficiency, like oilseed rape, because of the growth pattern of oilseed rape at this time of the year is soaking up mineralized nitrogen that would otherwise have been available for loss. Organic farming is prone to nitrate loss via leaching. Clover is often put out there as an excellent nitrate nitrogen environmental crop. Again, nitrate fixed by clover is just as prone to loss by leaching as nitrogen coming out of a bag. So good nutrient management practice and not putting on the excessive amount, applying it when you have growth to take it up, are key to minimizing losses.
So that's it for the Tillage Edge, and my thanks to Gary, Eddie and Shay for the excellent update from the Crops Forum. The full video of the Crops Forum can be found on the Teagasc Crops YouTube page. So finally, don't forget, if you like this podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague, and as always, review and subscribe on Apple Podcast or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy, thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.